Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Patrick Lovell. I am the producer with the $71 trillion truth. And this is my YouTube page and my podcast and all things I've presented many times as part sermon, part um, lecture, part self-help therapy. I'm, I'm on my 700 now 84th Truth Bomb riff. And I'm recording this on Monday, March 30th, 2026 at approximately 9 a.m. my time. And I'm invigorated. I am like, I've got so many wonderful feelings in my body and my mind and my head. I woke up this morning. I was exhausted yesterday. Spent a lot of time in the sunshine over the No Kings rally, interacted with hundreds of people, marched with thousands, well over 10,000, and presented the Clean New Deal amidst the contextualization of what felt to me like a market bazaar of ideas. And what I mean is like back in, like we've seen it always depicted in film, kind of like in, I don't know, 1700s Europe or the Middle East way back in the 1500s, that sort of thing, where, merchants would come and present their products and everybody's like, engaging and doing this, that, and the other. And it's the market. And it was a marketplace of ideas of democracy and all things counter to all things, of course, the vile, grotesque, pedo protector, racketeer in chief at a time when the world is coming apart. And of course, as always during No Kings, we saw thousands of signs with just incredibly brilliant and creative and wonderful expressions of just so many things to just like absorb and think through and interact with. And we were there right in the middle, and I'll share a couple of photos here in a minute, but we were there right in the middle of this bizarre area. And when I mean bizarre, not like Bizarre as in strange, bizarre as in a marketplace, Bazzare, I believe, or maybe two R's. Can't remember exactly how you spell that. But the long of the short of it is that it was incredible and it validated a lot of what's going on in my mind, maybe even more so than before. I think I had a lot of these answers before, but maybe in some way I was thinking this was kind of like a focus group of sorts. And I used to work in advertising way back in the day, and we used to do focus groups where we got people to respond to campaigns and tell us what worked and what didn't work and all that sort of thing. And, as a creative executive, you'd be like, trying to figure out the best pathways to get as much exposure and obviously juice on your product. And this was that. And what is it that we're selling? What is it that I'm selling? What is it that my colleague and my truly terrific, wonderful partner in this whole endeavor, a woman by the name of Roseanne Rabiel Amile, who just tirelessly gives it her all every day to be able to bring you what I'm doing and what now others are getting on board. And many of you out there have been so kind and generous with your time and sharing and, engaging and doing those things that have to be done in the social media circus to help grow the circle. But ultimately, what is this? It's a revolution of truth. And I can tell you, not sitting, standing, handing out really cool stickers of the Clean New Deal and engaging. And by the way, we were right in the middle of all of these different candidates running for office, and all of the different candidates running for office have to get signatures to be able to run in the primaries. And so, predictably, they were focused on their own platforms and getting people to understand who they are and selling their wares is what they're doing and what they're opposed to, all things No Kings and in the midst of. And it was really terrific. And I knew a number of these candidates in advance, and I've had conversations with them, and some are getting closer to becoming on board. Some are really tied to, more national sort of shall we say, networks and are going to be depending on certain money and platforms and everything else and are relatively careful about what they commit to. But see, that's politics. Everybody's playing a game. Everybody's going to tell you what it is that they're going to do for you in light of all the things that we're all rebelling against or resisting against or puking as a reaction to. I mean, that was a national sort of, I mean, this resistance of millions of people. I think the numbers have said it's 8 million. It looks like it was a lot more than that. They're always very conservative with the numbers, and it's interesting how they get those numbers. By the way, just a quick sidebar on that. I was talking to the organizer of my local chapter and how we were able to determine how many people are there. And basically, you know what the square footage of the space is that you've got the permits to be able to protest, and you can just take satellite shots or just shots with drones, and you can basically do a median height, weight, and size of most people, and then you can just do the math. And that's how you come up with those figures, which I think is pretty fascinating. And so we had somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people show up, which was terrific. And of course, the images around the country really made me swell up with pride and hope. And I really don't like to use that term hope because it was just so brutalized by the Obama administration. Hope and change we can believe in, a platitude that was just a setup. It's like to sell hope, to ultimately do what the Obama administration did to give us a situation where the Epstein class / MAGA zombie apocalypse that uplifted the pedo racketeering, criminal in chief, the Cheeto in chief, the Mad Magazine, Mad King. I could go on and on, mostly with expletives, and you can fill in the blanks with one of those, hashtags, exclamation point, this, that, and the other to just express super outrage and frustration. And the sum total of just this universe of what we're in the midst of is that it's evident to everybody that everybody, I think a majority of this country, let's put it this way. Even if No Kings didn't get 20 million people, which I think a lot of people were forecasting that like this means anything, that the movement would need 20 million people to somehow move the needle. I think that's ridiculous, first and foremost. I think courage is contagious. I think more and more people are going to be coming out and finally getting a little bit more involved and activated and knowledgeable about certain things that are probably most important in terms of actually having an election. All of these scenarios with the SAVE Act and trying to do everything they can to thwart people from coming out, all of the what we'll call shenanigans, and I hate to use that term, but it is that way in terms of purging voter rolls in swing states in places like Georgia, that the wonderful journalist Greg Palast has presented to us, that at least purged 3.5 million votes during the last election, and that was the difference between Harris and Trump, quite frankly. And there were so many other anomalies and this, that, and the other. I personally believe that the election was definitely compromised, sabotaged, and everything under the belt. I think it's absolutely obvious when you look back through the rearview mirror and you see kind of like the dancing gay, YMCA Trump, who was like blubbering, like incoherent, whatever, as he pretty much does every single day, and basically acting like it's in the bag and we don't need the votes and this, that, and the other. That was just completely, just projecting what it was. That it was like, I got it. I know I know a secret. There's really not much that Trump hides, to be honest with you. For Christ's sakes, he cheated at golf in front of the entire world. And I can tell you as a golfer, anybody who cheats at golf is an asshole. And fuck them. The whole point of golf is not to cheat at golf, okay? It's the whole point. And by the way, same with everything I do. That's why I like people who are dynamic, active, people who do things and achieve. I was thinking about that this morning with this levity of this uplift and listening to my, incredible music on my, morning routine while I'm doing my surf stretch exercises. And it was just like, you could just feel it coursing through every ounce of my body that we are so close to being able to knock this over. And I'll tell you why. Because my message to you, which has been the same message through 784 truth bombs, 783 truth bombs, whatever the number is, ridiculous over the course of 4 years, right? That has been trying to get people to understand the seminal point which I had in this focus group with hundreds of people all day interacting, and people were coming to me more so than known candidates and going, "What's the Clean New Deal? I keep hearing about the Clean New Deal. Tell me about the Clean New Deal." And I start with, "Well, tell me." And then I'd get a crowd of like three or four people in front of me, and I'd say, "Tell me what the priority of your issues are." And I am not kidding you. Every single person identified corruption as the seminal issue that they're concerned about. That's really at the top of their pyramid in terms of what has to be remedied. Okay. And then of course they went off on the tangent like we all do, which, everything from the war in Iran and, it's illegal, an act of Congress, and why are we fighting another war on oil, and why are we giving billions of dollars to Israel and considering, genocide and this, that, and the other. And it goes on in the Strait of Hormuz and gas prices and affordability crisis. And of course, it snowballs, right? But it was incredible that they were all saying corruption. And say it with me. What do I always say, my friends out there? Corruption births and fuels fascism, which was something that they all came around to in their own sort of consternation about what their issues are. And they both mostly, once they started to put, because it's difficult to get, and I've learned this throughout all of these truth bombs, and hence why I call it part sermon, part lecture, part self-help therapy, because it's really all of the above, because it's so difficult to encapsulate all of these different, incredibly important things that are happening on our universe that affect and impact the outcome, that we're all swimming in the four corners of our universe, trying to do our best, trying to get, protect our families, trying to get ahead, trying to do whatever we do in this life to just not only survive, but hopefully thrive, right? That's really the whole impetus of what the Clean New Deal is all about. But to be able to verbalize that, to be able to put those thoughts together in your head, and to be able to project what it is that's most important to you, I can tell you is extremely difficult. And this, for me, is being on the inside of a 14-year journey. It's really 13. 13 is the mile marker, but I've been engaged in this really my whole life. Okay. So let's just call it 40 years plus, but, more than that. Let's call it 50. I'm going to say 47 years. I've been engaged since I was at least 10 years old. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I kind of started thinking about how things work and what it all means and everything else. And, to put the thoughts into a cohesive structure to communicate effectively to people, to have them go, I want to listen to this guy. I want to tune in. I want to understand what he's talking about as it relates to corruption, because that's the biggest thing for me. And oh yeah, fascism is a huge part of it. So how's he going to put these things together in a way that also checks off all the box of all of these other things that I'm interested in and really want to turn the table on? But I'd say the priority for everybody, given corruption, is because they pretty much associate corruption primarily with the Trump administration. Of course, Trump himself, but the Trump administration. Most people are absolutely, at least people that have a college education, are astounded that we can see transparently all of the things that this president has done to break the law, to completely run roughshod and bulldoze the Constitution, while literally stealing, looting billions of dollars right before our eyes, while gas prices are going up, while the affordability crisis is through the roof. And everybody's trying to kind of keep it together. And then they're like, okay, I'd ask a follow-up question. So who's captured the essence of what you're concerned about, and who's laid out a plan concurrent to what you're seeing such that we can fix the problem? And I'd say 90% of the people that are interacted with were a little stumped on that. Now, granted, think about the surroundings. You've got thousands of people around you. You've got different booths that you're walking to. You're engaging, you're talking, you're involved with music and celebration and people with great signs. I mean, it's an overwhelming, waterfall of information, which is just extraordinary, right? And it's also kind of got this festival atmosphere. So but you want to be engaged, right? And I could tell by everybody's eyes, they were all looking in my eyes and vice versa. And I'm like going through this whole process, right? And also I'm going through the process because I've learned a long time ago, even though a lot of very smart people don't particularly like this method because smart people think they're smarter than everybody else. But I tend to apply the Socratic method because I want to know what other people think, because that's the only way I can orient this information. Because if I give the information straight, it's going to overwhelm people. In fact, the very first person I didn't really know how to ask questions or engage. So I had to kind of guide the conversation to try to figure out where this person was coming from. And honestly, I'm going to say about three-quarters through the conversation of me introducing the precepts of the Clean New Deal, the person was like, I'm a little bit lost. I'm not sure I can comprehend what's going on. And I learned from that conversation, my Socratic method is right. Because as long as somebody's focused on something that they understand and that they know, and then you can back engineer it into what we're talking about, can then you go, Eureka, or they go, my God, you've got the answers that I'm looking for. And if that happened for me hundreds of times in person, now, granted, there's a human connection thing, right? And plus I had some volunteers, of course, in addition to my colleague, Roseanne Rabiella Mile, who really built this incredible, groundwork. And I got to tell you, my friends, from afar, people who run campaigns and people who do the real grind work of organizing, boy, do I have a new level of respect for them, because I had a few working with me that are now on the team that really knew what they were doing. And man, the outreach was spectacular. They were actually working it, in the bazaar, getting people to come over to talk to me, to do this, that, and the other, to explain it. And they had so much fantastic energy. And so here I am basically getting to do in real time with people what I do here all the time. And oh yeah, by the way, this was pretty cool too. Many people came up to me and said, I watch your stuff. And I was like, all right. And so they knew where I was coming from. And they were like, no, this is great. I'll get on board and I want to sign or hop on board and be involved. And a lot of people, by the way, were looking at our swag. And this is why I've got this shirt on today, because they were all like, oh my God, that's brilliant, right? And so check out the shirt I have on today, right? It says, do you teach your children that it's okay to lie, steal, and cheat to become president? And here's this boulder of truth, right? Against all of the gravity of the lies and the misinformation and the disinformation, everything else. And by the way, we made these, my colleague made, wow, that's so cool that happened. That's disappearing. That's a sticker. Roseanne made these stickers of the Clean New Deal. So hopefully if I can pull out and get back to yeah, look at that automatic focus. But on the back, it says, okay, well, if you don't teach your children to do all of that stuff, why would you vote for a president that does? Discover the Clean New Deal, and it has a QR code. Dude, I can't tell you how many people, like, for example, this one guy who came up to me, who was a surgeon, I found out in the conversation. He looks down at one of our shirts that says it's not rocket science, it's racketeering. And he was like, oh my God, where do I get one of those? And I was like, in real time, just going, this is what it's all about. No, people want to support something that in this incredible arena of madness, of ocean of lies and ice and fascism and stealing money and billionaires and liars, thieves and pimps, whores, and junkies and the rotting American dream and the corpse, people are now starting to become invigorated. And like I've said so many times, we have to have a revolution of truth really promulgated and spread by smart people. That's really what it's going to take. And when I saw this surgeon and he was like engaged and talking to me, and in fact, halfway through the conversation, he's like, yeah, all of this applies to my profession. The insurance industry is out of control. And he's like, yeah, you could do this, that, the other. And, when you get smart people, you can compartmentalize some of the precepts of the Clean New Deal and bring them into the whatever your profession is. Okay. But again, just to finalize this part of this morning's truth bomb, listen, if you're one that's been supporting from the very beginning, right, and you're not liking, subscribing, and sharing, the sharing is the most important part. You might think, God, I listen to Patrick, I watch him kind of squirm. He does the turtle on his back thing because he's got this truth he's shouting at the world, but he's not moving anything, right? But we've got, I don't know, 50,000 plus followers, and I don't consider them followers, but that's just the way it lays out on Blue Sky. And, we've had, I was exploding on X until I got quashed on X. And then, and that was, back before the election. And, and I do Substack, learning Substack, but, I'm not a master at it, but definitely Blue Sky is where Roseanne and others that are involved with us do a vast majority of our work. But I drop stuff on Facebook on occasion. Whereas back in the day, like I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was definitely pretty much solely on Facebook, and I've got an audience of like 5,000 there. My social media numbers are big, but again, it just the algorithm shifts, the goalpost shift, all of these weird things shift, and everybody's all over the map reacting to Doge and flood the zone and all of these things. But then when they're standing in front of me and they've got their issues and they're hearing me say what I have to say, they're like, "Oh my God, you're exactly right," and I am. And we need millions of people to get their head around the information that I'm providing you. So on that note, I want to share my screen and I want to just kind of walk you through a couple of things, just to once again, as always, validate or just make the point and just kind of walk you through it. But on the front page of the New York Times today, let's just take a quick of the couple of headlines. Trump claims progress in talks to end war, then again threatens attacks. This is the New York Times. My friends, that was a headline that we would have seen in Mad Magazine back in the 70s. I shit you not. This is the nation's paper of record. Again, let's repeat that. Trump claims progress in talks to end war, then again threatens attacks. Okay. We understand how this whole bullshit happens. It goes on and all of the horrible things that are happening on a daily basis. I thought this was interesting in terms of just drawing your attention to it today. But again, kind of like a Mad Magazine satire that's real. I remind you, again, this is the nation's paper of record that has the most resources of any independent newspaper in the United States, which of course at once the most powerful country in the world for journalism. Now we're a fucking disaster of nightmarish, biblical construct that is the end of free speech. And there's a lot of reasons that happens. And by the way, if you've happened to see my Truth Bomb riffs, one of the greatest interviews I did was on the subject was with the guy, David Enrich. David Enrich of the New York Times, who is the deputy investigations director, and he wrote a book called Murder the Truth, which is how the billionaires are trying to destroy New York Times versus Ferguson, which enables pretty much free speech of the press. That's a landmark Supreme Court case that happened back in the 60s, as a matter of fact. But anyway, moving forward here, what they say about the East Wing is that Trump's ballroom design has barely been scrutinized. Architects say it shows. Here they've got this outline. Unnecessarily big, it says. Columns will block interior ballroom view. Very tall, I guess the columns are from the ground up, so that might mean something. Grand staircase doesn't lead to ballroom. No entrance from portico nearest ballroom door is here. Design bumps existing path ruins symmetry. I mean, are they critics or are they just like, this is common sense? This is the dumbest thing in the history of the world. This, while, pimp daddy Trump gets these private donations from all of these billionaires as some sort of quid quo. If anybody was investigating from the Department of Justice, if the Department of Justice wasn't completely corrupt, and there's things I'll, draw attention to at the end of this, but, and under the thumb of Pam Bondi for being a private, law firm for Donald Trump. And of course, he hung his picture out in front of the DOJ. This, meanwhile, by trying to get a subpoena to get grounds for firing Jerome Powell for remodeling the Federal Reserve. Okay. I mean, again, this isn't Mad Magazine, right? People are dying. There's a war. There's global tumult. There's this, that, and the other. It is such a, I saw that meme, and one of the memes that have been shared most, the frequency, the highest frequency of people sharing this particular meme was this picture of Donald Trump as this ancient Roman ruler. It was like Don the Pontificus or something like that, as one of the Caesars. And he's just this fat schlub with this, he may as well be, shouldn't compare it to him, but just from the toga party standpoint, if you remember John Belushi in Animal House, when he had the toga and the mustard, and I mean, he's just a slob and just this disgusting guy who's a, you know, allegedly a pedo, but definitely a pedo protector of the Epstein class and so on and so forth. So, okay, there's that. But I wanted to show you this headline because as I get into the next phase of this, the Epstein class had a signature weakness. Okay, so that is this article. Now, it's interesting. It goes into really kind of the psychology of the eyes wide shut billionaire class and why they did it and why Epstein was a fixer and a transactional con artist and how he was able to get away with it. Meanwhile, and I'll come out of here for stop share because I do want to make this point real quick with emphasis. Look, what was missing from that article was the most important part. Okay. This guy goes on to talk about leaders and billionaires and guys at Harvard and, in London and yada, yada, yada. And, short on the tech people and everything else. But he missed the most important parts. And there's a reason for that. This guy's a smart guy. He's cherry picking in an opinion piece of kind of whitewashing what really Epstein really was. He wasn't just a fixer. Okay. He wasn't just a connector. That's just ridiculous. He wasn't just a sexual predator and a sex trafficker. He were all of those things, but he was much more. This guy does not mention several names that are absolutely crucial to understand the Epstein situation. Of course, Les Wexner. He goes into Leonard Leo, but he doesn't go into the crux of Leonard Leo. He leaves out Jess Staley. He leaves out all things JP Morgan Chase and all things Deutsche Bank, not to mention several other major hedge fund managers, not quite at the level of if I said Leonard Leo, I was wrong. It's Leon Black. I apologize for that. But those names are all erased from his analysis. Not to mention Catherine Rumler. Who is Catherine Rumler again? For those of you who've paid attention, raise your hand if you know, write it down in the descriptions. Catherine Rumler was on Obama's White House chief of staff, who revolving doored right into the general counsel of Goldman Sachs, and then ultimately became somewhat of a, I don't know, kind of off the record guide, or shall we say, uh, advisor to Epstein. What is Catherine Rumler's per hour cost? Probably like $4,500 per hour, sort of thing. She was just like friends, supposedly, right? There's a lot of stuff, if you've watched my Truth Bombs, that was happening during the Epstein time with Rumler as CEO of Goldman Sachs in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis that feeds right into this stuff. And in addition to the names that he left off, probably the seminal name that he left off for me so far that's been revealed, William Burns. You tell me how a former assistant director of the State Department that goes into becoming the director of the CIA, how would that person be relying on Jeffrey Epstein to find a job? Because simply Jeffrey Epstein's a connector? Really? Really? Therein lies my knowledge of this stuff. When I tell you that I am the producer with the $71 trillion truth and what that means to corruption and people's seminal reaction of what the problem is, because they're trying to sort out affordability crisis, billionaires in office stealing money. What's the connection? That's the question they're asking. That's the question you should be asking. Because it's a pile drive. It's the end of the line. It's the death knell. It's what happens when you see the MAGA zombie apocalypse in a movie like, World War Z or whatever, when all of the, or sorry, Game of Thrones, when the army of the dead, are overtaking the wall, sort of thing. You know what I mean? They're climbing on each other. They overwhelm it. That's what the criminal class has done to our government over decades. That's led to a situation because of what happened in 2008 that blew the doors wide open by mismanagement, by really making Faustian bargains by people that we think are our friends, that ultimately would save the rich at the expense of tens of millions of people. That's been going on for 14 years on overdrive, illegally. That led to the nth degree, which is this, you know, monstrosity of a Godzilla. Like Godzilla, but it just, let's call it Frankenstein, Trumpenstein, right? He's literally Trump stain. Not only did he throw plates against the wall of the Oval Office because he was having some sort of hissy fit back in the day over COVID during the COVID time, but the Epstein class in its own right, and raping children, which isn't funny, which we have laws in this country to put people away like that forever, which apparently when child rapists end up in prison, they usually wind up with very bad ends, right? That's at least the sort of cultural motif. Yeah, but what was happening to these folks? They arrested Prince Andrew. They've got a lot of people have left their positions. Billionaires have stepped down when they're almost 80, and they've already done everything they can to basically rape and pillage of the world. And meanwhile, all of this stuff about Epstein happened 20 years ago. So people are like, okay, the government didn't stop Epstein then. And by the way, I asked a lot of people to consider that question. They're like, yeah. And in fact, really, some of the people that had the best response to that were young people in their 20s. They're like, oh my God, this makes sense. This is why I thought this has been happening my whole life. Yeah, it has. Thank God you're smart enough to be inquisitive enough to think about that, because you're going to inherit this madness and your whole world is going to be a boondoggle. I think, like, I watched a really compelling YouTube, presentation of this collapsing world of private credit that involves all of the top asset managers. We're talking about BlackRock, Blackstone. There is a massive crisis underway right now that, on top of everything else, because they've been basically piecing this thing together with what I'm about to tell you for the last 14 years, and now it's collapsing. And if the United States, which is in kind of the process, and I'm not sure which way it's going to roll, but we only have a very, I think, small window to basically stem the bleeding, to be able to, repurpose the United States to get us back to what we're supposed to be and make us much better than we've been, because most of this stuff has been happening in the shadows. But we're perilously close to, I think, the dollar, basically collapsing, I think. But it's really hard to tell because it kind of goes both ways. But it could, because it seems like every time the world collapses, the dollar gets stronger. But yet, at the same time, our economy is collapsing. So what then, right? China's yuan, I guess. I don't know. But they're not as aggressive as we are, and they don't have nearly as much plumbing as we do with our Federal Reserve System and so on and so forth. So yes, it's a conundrum, and it could be literally the end of the world, right? Temperatures are going up beyond comprehension. And by the way, many people came up to me, in addition to corruption and all things, their second most important part was the environment. And I'm like, okay, great. I can bring all of those things together. But again, to reiterate the question, who in the Democratic Party, because we know nobody in the Republican Party has a plan, and nobody else from the Republican Party, they've sold their souls, they're demons from hell. They've basically done everything they can to be terrorists, to collapse the United States, and to create what? Some sort of manifestation of Christo-nationalist fascism that has a Confederate sort of control in a Jim Crow universe. Yeah, something like that. In addition to the robber barons, okay? Yeah, we've done a lot of this stuff, of course, throughout American history. And now we're about to have the 250th anniversary, because we've also done things like we had the American Revolution, the North won the Civil War, we had civil rights, we had the war on fascism. So yeah, there's been more sacrifice than many of you can like really plug into, when you're trying to do the analysis, because a lot of people are like, but this and that and the other, and it's never been good. So I'm going to sit on the sidelines. I'm going to complain. Okay, I'm the man in the ring. All right. And now I'm recruiting millions of you. And I really, really, really hope and pray, even though I'm not a praying guy, but I really hope in Zen that you're going to be electrified by the information I'm providing, like everybody I met with face to face. And so many of you who have joined. So please Continue to do so, but spread the word. There is no time to lose. The time is now. What I'm telling you is what everybody knows. Nobody has a comprehensive plan requisite the corruption to purge the misery of tyranny and, like we'd say, to unleash the renaissance of possibility. Well, how do you make that platitude make sense? I'll tell you. It's called the Clean New Deal. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again and I'm just going to walk you through it briefly. Okay. And thank you for your time. Thank you for hanging in there. And next up on the screen is where you need to go, please, and wrap your head around this information and get this information to everybody you can as quickly as you can. And like my colleague Roseanne Raviola Mele recorded on Friday, I believe it was, she gave this really powerful, profound, highly invigorated speech. She came to me. She had just listened to my interview with former mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, a guy by the name of Rocky Anderson, and he had a phenomenal, platform of reinvigorating decency. And my colleague had just watched it, and she came into a room because we were joined, and she was at my house, and she starts railing off this like really impassioned, and I'll put a link to it below if I can. An impassioned sort of reaction to what Rocky was saying. And she's like, get them out. And what she was talking about were politicians that had been selling us down the river for decades. Get them out. No incumbents. Everybody's a liar. There's no good person. If you like Bernie Sanders and AOC, they're nice people. They're good people. They don't have a plan requisite the corruption. And I'll explore that momentarily. But that was the seminal sort of feedback from everybody. And then I talked to, ironically, I've been talking to these politicians, and they're like, yeah, every issue they have is part of the issues that we have, but they don't know how to talk about the money. Nor do they really want to be that centrally focused on the corruption, because they want to be centrally focused on, we're not Trump. But here's the thing, the corruption created Trump. So if you get rid of Trump, which by meaning get rid of, not just impeach, not just vote out, they've got to go to prison. We've got to restore the law. They've broken so many laws, it's unbelievable. And just because the Supreme Court said, yeah, he's doing this in office for the American people. What about stealing billions of dollars in crypto to start wars and to do, what do they call it? It's called, God, what is the trading called? It's not futures trading, predictive markets. They're making billions on selling exact scenarios of what's going to happen in the war when it happens in advance so they can pocket it. That's actually happening. And again, that's not Mad Magazine. I'm serious. That's happening right now. If you do the analysis on the amount of money, and I saw this on the signs during No Kings, how much money is being spent on this war? For what purpose? No, really, what purpose? Again, it's a forever war in oil, and how does that work and everything else? Yeah, that's really the purpose. But at the same time, it demonstrates and it makes clear, once again, at this time, I think we just had Palm Sunday, and we're coming up on Passover and Easter, which means from the Passover side, exodus from tyranny, right? Exodus from tyranny, predicated, by the way, on the law. That's the whole point of Exodus. Into what? Easter. What is that? The resurrection, right? The resurrection. Okay, so if we can, by the way, within the biblical constructs, create an exodus from corruption to create a resurrection of the American dream, at least on a platitude scale, I would think that that would appeal to many of you. Okay, but what about the bare bones? Because I don't speak just in platitudes or in biblical constructs. I speak in truth, which this is a revolution of truth. Why? Because nobody in either party, but particularly the Democrats in this particular case, are willing to reveal the truth that made all of this possible, that they were in league with because they made a Faustian bargain, because they came up with this large, giant legal apparatus called Dodd-Frank that was supposed to prevent everything that is happening from happening again. And they can't stop it, just like nobody stopped Epstein. That's what the rule of law is. If you take the cops off the beat, the criminals take over. Or you infest the police department where they become criminal too. This is the thing about humans. This has happened for history. We can all lie, okay? And if you lie, with impunity to hurt people and destroy people. We have rules and laws that can hold you accountable. But if they don't hold you accountable, you're going to keep doing it. One of the revelations or the analogies that I say to all of these people all the time, which was the home run concept, was what happens if you give a crack addict endless amounts of crack in a safe that you give them the key to? Not good things. You're going to seize up. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to die. You're going to get in a gun battle. You're going to end up with a Trump administration. Okay? So here we are, the Clean New Deal. So what I said to everybody is, we don't live in a democracy. Most everybody could understand that. They're like, yeah, well, we're represented, constitutional republic, but at the same time, the billionaires have all the strings and they're pulling it and they're revolving door, and those guys are lying to us over there that are, getting money from the billionaires to tell us things that we want to hear, but at the same time, their campaigns are being run by people that are telling them what to do because they're getting money from much more money from them than they are us. Okay, yeah, that's called monopoly, by the way, if you didn't know that. And many of you want to blame capitalism, and that's what we've become in terms of end-stage capitalism by way of gangster capitalism, monopoly capitalism, which I'm completely against. But I can promise you, we're not capitalists. Sorry. Capitalist is risk, reward. And when you make stupid decisions, or if you do something illegal, you're supposed to fail or go to jail and have all of your proceeds taken back. We have laws for that too. But that didn't happen because of what I'm telling you. We've given tens of trillions of dollars illegally, practically for free, to the same institutions that blew up the world and destroyed the law and destroyed millions. You remember seeing all of the homeless people all over the United States for however long that were out there that are now being forced into gulags, which is really scary. It's a Soylent and Green thing. I don't know what's going to happen on the other end of this. I've seen less homelessness in the city where I live, and I know they're all getting shipped to these major encampments. And oh yeah, by the way, that's another part of this fascism. Remember I said corporate fascism, corruption burrs and fuels fascism. Yeah, in my neck of the woods, it turns out that the Trump administration just bought warehouses to build ICE detention centers that were $50 million over market value. What do you think that is all about? Can your mind unwind that or unpack that and kind of source that and ask the right questions? Who might be involved? What kind of kickback? What kind of quid pro quo would that be involved with the Republican Party? Is that part of gerrymandering? Is that part of basically owning the courts? I mean, what is that exactly? It's corporate socialism. Or how do I want to phrase it? Look, we're not a democracy. We don't function as capitalism. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to guarantee the mafiocracy that is now fueling fascism. Okay? You've seen the movie a million times. If you've read Orwell, you know what this is all about. If you've seen, I don't know, everything from almost every really great, wonderful television series over the past, this renaissance of television, from Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad and, all things Peaky Blinders, and I could probably come up with a few others, but those are really high end for me. They all get it right. What was it called? Succession. Succession did a really good job at revealing all of these things, and they all do it. The writers know it. The writers know this stuff, but they know it intuitively, but they don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle. Why is it I am the only guy in the whole country that has the balls to tell everybody what the fuck's going on? That's really what it comes down to. And does that make me walk on water? Does that make me have the staff, of the commandments to be able to create? We're in the 10 plagues, are we not? Doesn't it feel like this is the 10 plagues, everything that's going on? I think it is. But it is also the, parting of the Red Sea. Because now millions are seeing it. They're taking their glasses off. To mix metaphors, and let's go into commercial fiction. I mean, in the culture wars, one of my favorite movies from the '80s was John Carpenter's They Live. Do you remember that movie, They Live? You remember, when everybody wore the glasses? No, when you got the glasses, you could see that everybody was an alien and they were lying, stealing, and they were trying to get you to conform, and they were going to basically destroy you. That was the idea. And the Ronnie Rowdy Piper, which had the longest fight sequence in movie history, puts on these glasses and he sees what the fuck's going on. That's what happens when you have the Clean New Deal. Okay, Literally, all of these metaphors. It's insane, but it's now, and I'm feeling it with every ounce of energy and DNA and everything. It pours through my veins. There is just such a wonderful opportunity when you get your head around this stuff because as a result of what we're in the midst of, we don't have free markets. Are you kidding me? It's all monopoly. The law is totally unequal, and we don't have separation of powers. Corruption rules everything, and millions are beginning to understand the threat of Project 2025. Nobody has a progressive, pro science, pro law platform that is concurrent or requisite the insanity of depravity and betrayal of Project 2025. This is the right side up mechanism to turn the tables on these billionaires that are destroying us like the pharaohs of old. Seriously. Or whoever is in power to basically supplant the people and make you expendable. And as I always say, I'm not expendable. Chances are you're not either. Okay, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You tell me right now. In 5 minutes, write down everything in the description section down below after you happen to hear this and question me, challenge me, everything else, and or come up with your ideas. What would you do if you could turn the tables on this madness? What would you do? Vote for Bernie? Would that be your answer? Well, Bernie is trying to. I'll tell you, he's really on it as it relates to AI. Yeah, we do need a moratorium on AI. I could not agree more. But in terms of the $4 trillion tax package to build and claw back some money from the billionaires. First of all, we don't need to do that. I like the idea of it politically, just because, yeah, hey, tax the billionaires. You don't understand our system. You don't understand, and neither does Bernie, even though Bernie should know this. He's just using it as a political draw, and he's pretending like it's a part of the affordability crisis. If you want to understand the affordability crisis, you got to understand my work, the con. There's a reason that costs for housing go through the roof. And it's everything that I've revealed over my work. And I'll put links below so that you can see it. But there's a way we can manipulate structures within the pipeline of how things get funded, built, so on and so forth, what we lend against, and why prices go through the roof. Same with, pharmaceuticals, same with, food, groceries, and of course, fossil fuel. When the hands are in the few and they run the show, they can bilk you for all you're worth. But then here's the problem: they're replacing you with AI, while at the same time, everything else under the sun, it's all coming unglued. It's all the end, right? You can see it right in front of your face. You've seen the script a million times before. How many times have you been in a movie where you're like, why is the babysitter running right to where the murderer is? I wouldn't do that. Where's the weapon? I am so sorry. I need to press pause if I can figure this out. Just give me 1 second. I got to get rid of this thing. Thanks for that. Sorry for that distraction. Hopefully that didn't weird you out too much. So basically, I'm going to go back to now. I've got a problem with my screen because I want to see my screen. Why isn't that going down here? Okay, I'm sharing the screen, but I'm not on it. Okay, here we go. So why would you be that babysitter that's being stalked by the murderer and make stupid decisions so that you were set up? I mean, everybody always did that in the horror films that I grew up with, right? And everybody would talk about that for weeks after. No, man, I wouldn't do that. I would have done this, that, and the other thing, and I would have been able to okay, that's what we have to do to this freaking terrorist operation that's completely suffocated all sensibility of reason and collapsed because everybody in power is in on it, and they were weak. They sold us a bill of goods, they protected themselves, and they pretended like they would help us out in due time if only we could survive long enough. Look, I've been through this hole for a way, man. I got buried in the avalanche of 2008. I came out the other side only by asking questions because I happen to be a producer and I know how to put things together, and I did it. And I went on this mission of 14 years that literally lasted took thousands of hours, millions of dollars to be able to get all of this information that I'm now giving you for free. I'm giving you the $71 trillion truth for free that can purge the misery of tyranny to unleash the renaissance of possibility. You want to save the world, you want to save your children, you want to save your grandchildren, you want to save life on this planet as we know it. There's only one way to do it: the Clean New Deal. And so, if you understand the perversion of power, so I want you to think about this real quick, okay? How many of you remember that we've had probably 1,000 years of this activity, but the priests have forever, many of them, preyed on children in the flock to sexually assault them, and that whole congregation knew it. And this has happened all over the country, probably all over the world. In fact, of course, it has happened all over the world. And we've known about this now for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. And it sickens me every time to think about, why would a congregation allow a priest to rape its children? Why? Well, maybe they were all raped too. I guess there's a psychological component in there I honestly don't understand, but I know millions of people have dealt with this. And I think it's got them paralyzed. I think they don't know what to do. I think that, like, when you have someone in a position of power, someone who's supposedly radiating from the pulpit, all of these, elements that are going to save your soul and the embodiment of God and this, that, and the other, they have a tremendous amount of power over you. And then if they sexually assault you, wait a second, what are you supposed to do? That doesn't make sense. Wait a second, you blame yourself. Did you do something wrong? Wait a second, I can't tell anybody. You've got shame. So you get quiet, but yet you still conform and you go to church and you allow that to happen to somebody else. And then you're kind of like, later, everybody knew it. I mean, this is the weirdest thing about people. Now, plug that into the Epstein class, right? What were they doing? Very similar stuff. But don't lose sight of the fact that who was involved. Even people that weren't involved with sexually predating children. Now, I'm absolutely certain Catherine Rumler had nothing to do with that. I'm sure William Burns had nothing to do with that. But if they didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, I'm calling bullshit. There's a reason why blackmail exists. There's a reason absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's a reason eyes wide shut. Okay? So what is the perversion of power that I'm addressing? Well, ask yourself the following 4 questions, like on Passover. Why is this night different from all other nights? What is qualified immunity? Why do the police have absolute power to murder with impunity and not be held accountable? I'll say it again, and I've said it 1,000 times. I'm not against the police shooting people. I encourage them to shoot the bad guy. But I want our police to be professional, and they should have basically taken out the entirety of January 6th. But there was a reason that didn't happen. So to have police be able to kill at will, like ICE, like in the case of Alex Preddy and all things Renee Nicole Good and all the others whose name I don't know at the moment, or I can't think of at the moment, and I apologize for that. But in all of Black Lives Matter and this, that, and the other, qualified immunity makes it that the police are above the law. Is that your understanding of the Constitution? How about the judges? Why would SCOTUS, who got backdoored billions of dollars in prizes in I don't know, gifts and this, that, and the other, to basically get them in a situation where they were all unified behind what? Everything that we've seen that would end up doing something as unimaginable, given the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, to make this idiot the Pontius, pedophilius, right? I think that's what it was, pedophilius. This guy in this emperor's new clothes on really bad acid, while all of these sycophants, these liars, pimps, whores, junkies, and parasites are all like, oh, King Donald, right? What about that is American? What about the 3 of these elements are American? And then ultimately, what is the Electoral College? Why would the minority have the authority to overrule the majority? Well, because that's what they baked into the system to make sure that, I guess at that time, should women and Black people and trans and this, that, and the other gain opportunity to vote, we got a way to be able to make sure that they're not the ones running the country. We are. So, of course, we're not a democracy. A lot of people like to say we're a constitutional republic. Then you throw gerrymandering on top of that, and it goes on and on and on. The tricks are unbelievable. We've got to consider those four questions as we go into the precepts of the Clean New Deal. I hail from the 80s, my friends. So we used to play Rubik's Cube. And I got to be honest with you, I was never able to put the entirety of the Rubik's Cube together. I could only get two sides. I never got all four sides. My son, believe it or not, got all four sides because he was watching a lot of videos of that early, and I never spent the time to do that. But when you put all four sides together, you've got the entirety of the matrix that you need to understand to become a social warrior for justice, joining in the civil rights movement, the Clean New Deal, to purge the misery of tyranny, to unleash the renaissance of possibility. How? First and foremost, we got to create a new modern day Glass-Steagall Act. We learned back after the Great Depression that through the investigation of Ferdinand Pecora, that if you don't have aligned interest in finance, you can allow banks in the shadows to gamble with other people's money. Those are the three most dangerous letters in all of finance. We're supposed to be capitalists, risk, reward, caveat emptor, which means you need to do your homework. If you're going to invest in something and it's a Ponzi scheme and you get burned, hey, that's your problem, right? But also, unless they bring some sort of civil settlement and judgment against the guy who was doing this and they, have money that you can get paid back, that's years and years and years in the process. Okay, whatever. What we learned in the aftermath of the Great Depression, where 20% of the American populace was unemployed, living in Hoover towns, hungry, starving, while they were watching the wretched rich get away with literal murder, they learned how they got away with literal murder. Do you remember, like I was saying before, the Eureka? People are asking the question about corruption and fascism and how it works together. When you have the story, then can you turn the tables? You have to understand what is broken to be able to fix it. And this is the black box of truth. What we did in the aftermath of, shall we say, Clinton Ford, is we did monumental deregulation, desupervision, and decriminalization that basically gutted the Glass-Steagall Act to prevent commercial banking from being merged with mega mergers with investment banking. And what we did in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, while the investment banks were using warehouse lines to facilitate tens of millions of felonies to sell liars' loans, they blew up the world economy. And when the whole thing came crashing down, we illegally floated them tens of trillions of dollars, not hundreds of billions like the TARP package and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell tried to sell us back then. And all of media did as well, because Anderson Cooper and everybody else are a bunch of fucking idiots. Their access to power, idiots. And they're the reason why Les Moonves and so on down the line, and Jerry Zucker at CNN said Trump was good for ratings. They played Russian roulette with our democracy. And they weren't capable of discerning and figuring out what the fuck was going on in our country. That's not their job. They get paid millions of dollars to confuse you, not to provide you clarity. I'm giving you the $71 trillion truth for free. Do you get it? Are you following the bouncing ball? Because when you provide the full faith and credit of the United States to provide liquidity to a criminal gangster organization, what do you think is going to happen? Everything you're in the midst of. So we've got to create a new Glass-Steagall Act to separate commercial banking from investment banking, and we have to have the statutes, up front for everyone in the world to understand that you cannot provide exigent lending or fiat currency. We can make money out of thin air, yada, 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 because it's based on all of these corollaries of this amazing power of resources and knowledge and military and this, that, and the other. So it's not like printing money out of thin air. It's based on everything I just told you, which is power. The power can be manipulated, okay? And so we have to take the power back with knowledge, because knowledge is power. So when you understand that we have to create a new Glass-Steagall to say that we will never provide exigent lending to global racketeering. Yeah, that's got to be in the statute, even though it already is. But it's got to be even more clear in the statute. Why? Because that's what we've been doing for 14 years, nonstop. That's the $71 trillion truth. What's the flip side of that? Well, what happens if you have unlimited money? You spend it on campaigns because the lowest ROI is on a pimp or junkie, parasite or junkie of Congress. They're all getting paid to lie to you, to piss on your head, telling you it's rain. How are they able to do that? Because corruption was made legal by Citizens United. I referenced Bernie Sanders before, and I said he doesn't have all the answers. He has this answer. So I know you support that. We've got to end Citizens United. So, two sides of the same coin. You've got to end, you got to create a new Glass-Steagall and end Citizens United. That's the first two um, precepts. The third precept, which is the most important part of this whole thing, is to demonstrate, because I'm not talking in platitudes, I'm not talking hyperbole, I'm not exaggerating. In fact, I'm low on what we've actually done. We've provided $71 trillion that obviously we can, provide the forensics. And there's this junkie Jed, is what I should call him, who likes to comment all the time on my YouTube page where he's like, they're banknotes, they're not dollars. First of all, banknotes are dollars, you idiot. But second of all, the plumbing of the Fed is such that they can pretend, like with the too big fit to fail apparatuses, that there's these bank holding notes that the banks actually use as their base to be able to, deal with what Dodd-Frank had elicited to do. That they gotta pass the safety and soundness test, right? That they have enough capital to be able to form all of these functions that banks are supposed to do. What do banks do? Well, they hold money, they transact, but then they make money by providing loans, do they not? Commercial loans, residential loans, this, that, and the other loans, credit card loans, yada, yada, yada. How do they do that? Well, they have to be able to manage the money. Okay. So there is a slight difference by way of this notion of banknotes, by what that means in the safety and soundness and what happened between how the banks actually operate. But it's smoke and mirrors, because in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, we had to provide tens of trillions of dollars to stabilize the financial system that was in the midst of a run that went bankrupt because of global racketeering predicated on liars' loans and securities and derivatives. That took a $4.5 trillion global housing collapse and turned it into a $900 trillion global calamity. Okay. Now it's notional value. There's a lot of things that you could talk about, but those are the real figures. And when I'm talking about the $71 trillion truth, I'm talking about 33 trillion. It's really 29 trillion is the official number of liquidity that went into the system in 2009, backdoored illegally because the Federal Reserve Act 13.3 and the statute says that you cannot provide exigent lending to commodities in real estate, among other things. Okay. It says that in the statutes. And I've listed that in my white paper. All you have to do is go up, and I'll go up to the top here real quick. All you have to do is go to, the white papers, Federal Reserve Act 13.3. It's all there. And then you can, if you're a journalist, you can cite that, you can use that, you can suddenly open up your eyes. It's kind of like, think about that from this perspective, guys. People are going absolute batshit crazy with the release the Epstein files, release the Epstein files. And like I like to say all the time, they've released so much in the Epstein files. We have so much evidence to go after and create so many investigations to take down the entire apparatus based on the information we have. We don't really need more information. There's plenty of information on Donald Trump. You have to have the investigation that gets the evidence, that gets into a court of law, that has trials, that has jury trials, and then we leave it up to the American people. If you get people on the actual jury trial that can see through, and it's tough because you got to get every one of them on, you got to get a plurality, right? You got to get everybody. And if one person doesn't believe it, the whole thing collapses. Okay. We have a really amazing system to protect individuals. But man, when those individuals become billionaires, they become above the law because they can get apparatuses of attorneys that'll lie, that'll say that they don't know anything about Epstein, yada, yada, yada. And how are you going to do it? The Supreme Court says that you can't have quid pro quo. But how do you prove quid pro quo? You have investigations. What do? I'm an investigator. I'm a forensic analyst. I know how to get to people that know how to make shit happen. And when you put the whole thing together, you create the kind of work that I've done. How come you haven't heard of me? Because the most powerful now private lenders in the world that are about to collapse, they don't want you to know that they got tens of trillions of dollars illegally so that they could bury you. Okay. that makes me the most dangerous person in the world to the power that controls us all. And until millions of you get the information and live in it, absorb it, immerse yourself in it, and then spread it like wildfire because it's the truth you're looking for. It's the answers you want. I'm giving it to you on a platinum platter. How do I know? I've been face to face with hundreds of you. I've talked to thousands of people over the years. I've seen it in every construct. I'm making the case that nobody else has the full paradigm to deal with this monstrosity of corruption led by Project 2025 and the billionaires, the bad billionaires. Not like there's any good billionaires, but the really worst of the worst criminal, Christo-fascist, white nationalists ready to blow up half the world, for Armageddon so that they can have absolute control because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when a group of men power discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. It's just manipulation, psychology. And are you their bitch? Or are you a citizen? Because if you're a citizen, it means that you rise to the fore. And if I'm selling you what you've never heard anywhere else, put it through your filter. Put it through anything that you've got to get your mind around if you want a fair system where you don't have cops shooting black kids in the back and systemic racism in prison. If you want the education to rise to the level it needs to be a superpower, this is what you want. If you want a renewable energy paradigm and get off of fossil fuel and endless wars and everything else you throw into the mix from, genocide to this, that, and the other, this is how you fix that. And everything else, it's NASA, okay? When you think of NASA and you've watched films where it's like, okay, you see like 700 people in a room at mission control, and they're all like working on different, computers and this, that, and the other. Yeah, they're all specialists in specific places. Are we a large company, a large country? We're huge. And we've got many millions of very intelligent people that can do incredibly intelligent things to reconfigure the system if only the people demand by putting people in power in Congress to be part of the Clean New Deal to basically force light into darkness. Because $71 trillion is the starting point. It's not about finding the money. It's not about taxing the billionaires. Yeah, we should tax the billionaires. There's no question. But that's only so that they can't ultimately buy lawyers and accountants and this, that, and the other to take over our government, to create Project 2025. That's why you tax the billionaires, okay? But it's not to fund government programs. Congress has the power of the purse. We're the global reserve currency, and we operate with fiat currency. It's about productive capacity. If we want to create a new middle class that just is a rising tide that raises all ships, and we're just on fire for the next 100 years, this is the way you do it. It's not about the money, because once you get money into jobs and people have jobs and then they have taxes and they pay into society, that's the economy. Not a handful of billionaires laundering a bunch of shit until it blows up and then they pay themselves with the full faith and credit of the United States. Can you see it? Do you understand what we're dealing with now? Everybody that I met with in person did. So whoever is watching this and you're like, God damn it, Patrick, you're absolutely right. Okay, share the shit out of this. Become one of us. Unite with us, okay? So to finish off the rest of the precepts of the Clean New Deal, we got to end qualified immunity and presidential immunity and judicial immunity and the Electoral College. By the way, all of this stuff's going to take time. But if you have the vision and you get people running on it and you throw them in Congress, we can do this in the next, 4 years to stop the bleeding and to try to reemerge. But then it's going to take as many years after that to actually put this all in play. But that's okay, because that's how you build the economy. What they're doing now is they're destroying us. So do you want to live or die? That's the question. And then ultimately, to that point, we got to get 13 justices in the Supreme Court to basically defeat the Roberts Court, because these son of a bitches have sold us down the river. And then ultimately, for the fascists, by the way, and then ultimately, we have to institute term limits. Now, I said it's going to take some time. That's fine. We always need new flesh blood. We need dynamism. We need people coming in at the same time. But at the same time, there's a balance. Just like I experience every day when I'm feeling fantastic and I'm doing my surf yoga. Honestly, that's the greatest feeling that I have of my day, in addition to some other really wonderful things I get a chance to do. But the bottom line is that's dynamism. It makes the blood flow. It makes your head think. It makes your heart strong. It makes your whole body feel so wonderful. And when you express that and you feel that with everybody else, and we have a tribe of that, my God, now we're talking. And then ultimately, you got to end the grift of these people like Marjorie Taylor Greene that can get $27 million over 6 years and go, I'm out. We got to end insider trading inside of Congress. Now, I know most of you watching this agree with everything I just said. I know most of you are like, okay, wow, but who is this guy, Patrick Lovell? Well, I mean, I like it, but I'm not seeing it all over the place. I need millions of other people to jump on before I know this guy's legit and everything else. Okay, I'm not talking to you. You're lazy. You're the reason we're in this business. Okay, you're not going to get us out of this business. I'm talking to the millions of you that are badasses, that are people that get shit done, that played sports, that have tried to achieve, that have broken your own goals, that know what it's like to achieve. And you feel wonderful about it. And you strive and you strive and you try to do the best you can. And some days you're not rising to the task. And other days you blow through a hole through it. That's okay. That's what life is, a system of problem solving. I'm looking for smart people. Okay. I'm looking for smart people to do the most rudimentary shit because it's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Do you want to defeat the system that's destroying everything that you work for? You don't. Who's going to do it, my friends? We are. This isn't about me. I'm not the savior. I'm just the fucking deliverer. The truth is our savior. So if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and decency and integrity and equality and opportunity and beauty and sustainability and anything else you can think of that creates life and the protection and kindness and generosity and all of those things, when we merge in unity behind the clean deal, it is our destiny to purge the misery of tyranny, to unleash the renaissance of possibility. But if, and only if, you become a nuclear reaction vector to the big bang of truth that I'm dropping, that we're dropping, and that's when light overcomes darkness. The Bible says, let there be light. Fine. The universe says the Big Bang. They're pretty much the same thing. So it's a wide take if you believe in liberty and justice for all, where the law is supreme. You got to have common sense. Thank you. And again, we got swag. And if you buy swag, by the way, and we make this MAGA type swag, we're a 501c4. It goes to pollinating candidates running for the midterms so that we can have a national consensus and a real political organization with teeth that's going to lead us to a huge rally in Washington, D.C., where we're going to surround Congress, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice, the FBI, probably throwing the Pentagon in there, and so on and so forth. And then we're going to rally to the Washington Mall, where we're going to present this stuff like a Tony Robbins freaking escapade. I'm just kidding. No, it's going to be like, in between Abe Lincoln, who said, a nation for and by the people who shall not perish from this earth, to Martin Luther King that said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Okay, the time is now. If we don't take it back now, as everybody at No Kings knows, we're not going to get another chance. And it's not that we don't fight for saving elections. We don't fight for, all of the mishigas that's happening in ICE, in warehouses and protesting and all of those other things. All of that has to happen. But we have to be out there. We have to share. We have to get the Clean New Deal out there. We have to find people willing to spread the truth, because we are dying in an ocean of madness and lies. And again, this is what I was going to say about the swag. So again, look, lies, 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 lies. Do you teach your children that it's okay to lie, steal, and cheat to become president? Then why would you vote for it? Thank you, my friends. All the best to you. I'm always open if you have questions. If you want to volunteer, if you want to get involved, please reach out to me. Just spread the word like your life depends on it. It does. Onwards and upwards.